Welcome to the 2023 Coaching Summit. This Coaching Summit is brought to you by us, Zoe Hawkins and Joe Wheatley from Inga Company, a global coaching training organisation. It is our mission to make coaching as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, and this Coaching Summit is one of the ways in which we do that. If you'd like to connect with us outside of this summit, then please follow us on Instagram, connect with us on LinkedIn, or join our Facebook group, The Coaching Crowd. We encourage you to share your learnings from these sessions and tag us in our social channels so we can share in the learning with you. But for now, sit back and enjoy the session. We can't wait to hear what you think.
Welcome everybody. I am Jo Wheatley. I am one of the co-founders of Inga Company, the hosts of the Coaching Summit, and we've had such a wonderful range of coaches sharing their knowledge, skills and experience with you today. They've been part of our coaching trainings or our Coaching Crowd Business Lounge, and I've been looking forward to this session for the whole summit, and I think it's a perfect way to round it off. So I'm delighted to introduce to you Paul Douglas, and today's session is using music as a tool in coaching. I don't think I've ever seen a session with that name before, and I've heard a sneaky peek behind the scenes of Paul's session, so I'm really looking forward myself to this session. A little bit about Paul. Paul is training to be a coach with us, and is a very special individual. He's qualifying as a coach. He's a leader with 40 years of experience in leadership, management, consultancy and creative projects in the music, education and charitable sectors. And in this session, he's going to share with you practical tips and guidance on our mindful and emotional response to music in a coaching setting. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and share with Paul in this session.
Thanks very much, Jo, and hello everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're joining from. I'm just going to share my screen, so perhaps Shelley, you could just give me a thumbs up to say that that's gone through okay.
Can see your screen, Paul. That's great.
Good stuff. So, yeah, it's been brilliant the last couple of days, hasn't it? To look at various different aspects of coaching. And as somebody who's been involved in leadership and management and education and music for many, many years, I've been trying to think about how to integrate some of those insights and transferable skills into my own coaching practice, and being kind of real and authentic in that, and thinking about how we can use the power of music in that. So I thought probably the best thing to do to introduce this topic, because we've had a lot of words over the last couple of days, right? There's been a lot of words spoken on the screen, and you've probably written a lot of words down to capture some ideas that people have given you some inspiration. And in the process, what has happened is all those words have kind of gone in, and sometimes like the words have kind of, you filled up your word bank and there's no more words left to say or to kind of absorb. When that happens, when words fail, then maybe music speaks. So I'm going to play a little bit. You might want to kind of get your feet on the floor and ground yourself and feel relaxed in whatever chair you're in. Perhaps you want to close your eyes and allow this bit of music just to take you to somewhere else and speak to you in a different way. Here we go. If that spoke to you, we'll have more of that later, but if that spoke to you in some way, if you feel you have the words to express how that spoke to you, just put it in the chat. So something, a little bit about me before we move on. So as Jo says, I've been involved in the music business since I was a teenager. And I've been a partner in a record company for the last 30 years. And I also, as part of that, coach songwriters at the European Songwriting Seminar, which takes place towards the end of the summer every year in Central Europe. And this year it's going to be in Strasbourg. And if you're interested in that, there's 1 or 2 spaces left. Do contact me if you know anybody that's interested in songwriting. For the last 10 years, I've also been on the senior leadership team at Services for Education, which is an organisation that provides music lessons to over 35,000 children every week in Birmingham. And as with all performing artists that probably you know and I know, we've had a kind of portfolio career involving concerts and live work and studio work and writing and books and consultancy, and it's never been dull. It's never been dull, and there's always somewhere to go, always something to look forward to. But the thing that's really getting me excited these days is coaching, and I'm really grateful for the community of coaches that I've found through the coaching crowd and many other spaces as well. I found it to be a very supportive and a slightly different feel, a very positive feel, a feel of supportiveness and being holding on to stuff very lightly and being very generous with time. And I hope you find that is your experience as well. So in this session, we're going to ask these questions. How can we encourage active listening? How can we be more open to creativity? How can we utilize more of the whole brain and our whole selves in a coaching setting, which complements that coaching space? How can we start to utilize the power of music? Now, I know a lot of you have been putting up in the warm-up group and messaging me to say, I'm really looking forward to your session on Tuesday. It's going to be amazing. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. But I can't cover all of this in kind of 45 minutes. We all know that music has that power, doesn't it? We all know that when we need to be in a certain mood or when we want to feel a certain way, we put a certain piece of music on and it helps us, or we get involved in some kind of music, or we just happen to come across somewhere that's playing a piece of music and it takes us right back somewhere. So this is just the start, and we all have different musical tastes, different musical experiences. We all have different what's called cultural capital, which is where our experiences of culture have formed who we are and our understanding of the world. James Rhodes put it this way. He said that the creative arts help us to look inside of ourselves and express what's going on in the outside world. There's something about the interiority of music. It kind of speaks very deeply to our inner being. There's a great TED talk, which I'll put the link in with these slides, by James Rhodes a few years ago, talking about the power of music to really help us to express what's going on inside ourselves. And I've been privileged to I've been married to a music therapist who's one of the UK's longest serving music therapists. Most music therapists only start their music therapy career in their kind of 40s and 50s. So I've been quite fortunate to kind of sit alongside this fantastic practitioner for nearly 4 decades. And one of the key things that came out of the kind of post-war era was the kind of the way in which music could help people who've been through trauma and stress and help them to kind of process some of that in a non-verbal way. And Julia Alvin was a pioneer in this in the 1960s, a music therapist herself, and wrote a textbook in 1966, which is still sitting on my shelf over there. And I came across these words the other day, which really sum this up. Music works at id, ego, and superego levels. It can help release and control the emotions at the same time, give a sense of purpose to the listener. It can sublimate emotions and satisfy the desire for perfection through high aesthetic and spiritual experiences that reflect all of life. That's a bold statement, isn't it? But if we think about it, we know that there's a lot of truth in that. It's a very powerful tool. Andre Ferriente, Italian guitarist, said music has the power to heal, transform, and inspire, and we have the power through deep listening to increase our intuition and self-awareness. For me, one of the things I love to do, people were talking earlier in one of the earlier sessions about what do you need to do to go and get some rest or some relaxation or to connect with yourself again after a busy time. For me, that's very often been just going across to a piano. You can't see, but in kind of over that side of the room, I've got a little baby grand over there. And I would go often at the end of a coaching session or a training session, just go over there and allow the music to take me to a different place of self-awareness and intuition. And Jane Swan, who's a fairly well-known author, so a wordsmith anyway, she asked this question: how is it, I think it's quite a jealous question actually, how is it that music can, without words, evoke our laughter, our fears, and our highest aspirations? And if we could answer that question, we would solve a lot of problems in the world, wouldn't it? But the fact is that research is still going on about the power of music and the way in which it can evoke all those different things. So my question is like, well, how can we as coaches tap into some of that? How can we tap into some of that? And so that's a kind of quest that I set myself a while ago, and in my coaching practice now, I do offer the opportunity to kind of utilize music in some way. So the power of music is about summoning emotions. We're looking at research that kind of neurological experts have done about which side of the brain we tap into when we connect with music, and it's a different side of the brain than the rational side of the brain. A lot of you will know about this. And our human response, it's a very, it's not an AI response to music. It's a very human response to music that we have in our brains. And it's uninhibited. The response to music is uninhibited by ability, condition, impairment, illness, or disease. And I want to give you two examples of this. One that comes from the very start of life, and one that comes from the end of life, from my own experience. So when we were expecting our first child, one of the times we would really make sure that we relaxed at kind of after dinner was watching Neighbours with Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan. Now, those of you of a certain age will know what I'm talking about here. It was like a phenomenon certainly in the UK. I think it probably was in Australia as well. And that was about the only time in the day where we really just kind of sat on the sofa and relaxed together. And interestingly, about kind of 6 to 12 months later, when we got to that point again in the day, our beautiful daughter was in her most relaxed state whenever she heard the theme tune of Neighbours, because actually our listening starts in the womb. It's one of the first senses to be developed. And our response to music and our listening and our connection with what we hear is one of the last things to disappear as well. You probably know of examples of people who've been in comas and they can remember the sounds they heard when they were in that coma. My mother-in-law is currently in pretty advanced dementia in a care home at the moment. Her world exists just a couple of inches in front of her eyes. She doesn't know who her family is. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know what day of the week it is. She doesn't really have much connection with what she's doing. But the other day we went, my wife and I went and we went and played some old music to her. We played her the Skyboat song and things like this, some ancient tunes. And she responded in the most normal way imaginable. And it was so beautiful because for a moment you got a glimpse of this beautiful soul that that was still there. And music it's a combination of sounds and pitches and rhythms. And so often people ask me, well, what's the difference between noise and music? And I suppose the difference is that noise is a bit random, okay, whereas music is organized sounds put together to create a moment. So it's time for a quiz, okay? Now, you probably played this quiz in a different way during lockdown. And what you would do is you would play the first 10 seconds of a track of music, and you say, I want to know the artist and the year. So you play an ABBA tune, and then everybody go, Waterloo, 1970, 4, I think, 6, I don't know. Okay, and then you get a point for this and a point for that. Okay, well, in this quiz, okay, every answer is going to be unique, or it can be unique, and actually it's still always correct. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play just a very short snippet of a tune. Okay, sometimes it could be just 2 notes. Okay, and this is a bit of an experiment, really. I want you to put in the chat what emotion gets summoned when you hear this short snippet of notes, just to demonstrate to all of us that actually it takes almost nothing to take us back to those emotions. So here we go with the first little snippet then. So what emotion did that bring for you? Good, let's try another one. Yeah, much calmer that, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, let's try another one. Joy, yeah, fun, makes you smile. Yeah, reminds me. There's that particular tune always reminds me of the ice cream van. Actually, that's the tune it uses. Tom and Jerry. Yeah, okay. What about this? Yeah, threat, foreboding. That's a good emotion. Yeah, trepidation. Yeah, stress. Yes. Okay. What about this one then? Yeah, you see, as soon as you think Christmas, you think family joy. Yeah, excitement, happiness. It's not that far away, is it? I mean, we're already in July now, right? So can you see how, thanks for all those comments. Brilliant. Brilliant. And you see so many people have got so many different answers to that. And I'm just going to try one more. Yeah. Now, if I was to play this in a coaching session, that funeral march, okay, it's probably going to trigger all kinds of memories, isn't it? It's going to take somebody back to a moment. Or if I was to play Fear Release, okay, in a coaching session, it might take somebody back to when they were desperately trying to play that piece on the piano, but they could never quite play it, and the frustration that might come out. Or it might bring back, you just don't know what might be triggered by that. And what gets triggered is data. It's emotion, it's data. It's like, well, that's useful in one respect, but it may or may not complement the coaching space. Yeah, I keep losing count for few of these. Yeah, okay. So, like Simon Sinek says, before you embark on something, maybe thinking about the why. Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to incorporate? Because I haven't seen it before. I've rarely seen. I haven't, observed any coaching sessions where somebody's incorporated either live music or recorded music or any kind of music. So in my mind, it's to create a sensory space, a shared present experience that kind of builds the coaching relationship. It's a shared experience that both the coach and the coachee can have. It can help us to become grounded and mindful. Okay, and we might touch on that a bit more in a bit when we have a bit more of an extended time. It can help us to connect and focus with the whole self. So it can tap into a different part of the brain. So perhaps we've had lots of thoughts and rational things go on in our brain, and we need time to process it. So you're thinking, okay, I get the why, but how where do I start? How do I go about something like this? And for me, it starts with sorting out some audio settings. So on Zoom, and most online platforms, everything is very much geared towards speech, which is probably why at the moment you're thinking the sound of my speaking is not very good, because actually I've got this off. I think I better check. I better check that I've got this correct here. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, I have. So, like I say, everything is geared towards speech. And so there are noise suppressants within Zoom and within Teams and within Google Meet and everything. Imagine it's all geared up towards speech, because that's what Zoom and Teams, they were designed for meetings, for talking. And pretty soon Zoom, about 3 years ago, when Zoom became really, really popular, they developed this audio profiling, so you could switch off the suppressants, okay, and use what's called original sound for musicians. Now, it's not just for musicians. Actually, if you want to play a YouTube clip or a video of any kind that's got any kind of music or recorded music, you'll soon discover that actually, unless you've got original sound kind of ticked here, you're not going to hear the thing correctly. And so when you do that, you get this option at the top left hand side of your Zoom window that says original sound for musicians, and you can switch it on and off during the session. Actually, you can toggle between the two. When you have it on, which is what this screenshot is here, you see that original sound for musicians is on and noise suppression is disabled. Music won't work basically unless you enable that. So what if you're not using Zoom? What if you're using Teams? So if you're using Teams, you need to go to device settings, and you head down there and you make sure that noise suppression down here is off. Again, the default is on because it's very much geared towards meetings, which is great. But actually, as soon as you want to start using anything that's not speech, you're in trouble. So again, I'm going to put all these slides on the group, and you can grab this rather than trying to make copious notes as we go along. So what about the rest of the house? So if we've got our audio settings as we want them, what I would tend to do is I would have a Spotify window open and have that ready with a playlist and with a track or 2 or 3 that I think are likely we might want to use. And that where we get to the point where I want to suggest we maybe have a listen or ask whether it would be helpful with the client to kind of say, hey, look, we've reached a point in the session now where maybe it would be helpful for us to have a couple of minutes to reflect on this and listen to a piece of music together. How would you feel about that? And by contracting like that and then listening together, that really helps. So again, in an ideal world, I would now share this with you, but obviously for copyright and licensing reasons, I can't do that now. But I would then also send the track link after the session, assuming the person has got Spotify. Haven't got Spotify, there's also the option of YouTube. But there's a few things we'll talk about what to avoid in a moment. So when could this happen in a coaching session? So what I've tried to do so far in my coaching sessions is think, well, where might a mindful moment be helpful? Where a time of reflection might enhance the experience? Perhaps at the start of a session, perhaps the client's arrived in a bit of a kind of chaotic state, and it's like, okay, what can we do to help ground this moment and help the client really connect on a deeper level? Maybe at the end of the session, I've often used some music at the end of sessions where before we get into the, okay, what did you find helpful today? What's your reflection on? What's your takeaway? How did you find what was good for you today? What are you taking away from this? Before we get to that point, is there a little moment there where we've kind of reached a point where we need to transition? And sometimes there can be, we all know, can't we? We all know that sometimes we get caught off guard, and perhaps there's an aha moment of profound depth, and it's like the client's struggling to process this moment. I've had this myself. I mean, I've also had coaching myself over the last couple of years, and there's been moments where I've had to go, hang on, I need some time to process this. Can we listen to some music? Can I put some music on? Can I go away and play something? That would be really helpful for me. Other people might say, actually, I need to draw something right now, or I need to kind of just sketch something, or I need to kind of look at a piece of artwork or something, just to kind of connect with the depth of this moment. So that's the when. Some things to avoid. So I would avoid well-known pieces of music that has strong associations. So some of the things I played before, like Star Wars and Fur-Elise, or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or Jaws, or that kind of, there are strong associations, and I don't think, perhaps somebody's got, maybe some of you might disagree, but I don't think that's helpful actually to have strong. There's enough music out there on Spotify and on YouTube and stuff without you having to use really well-known things like that. And actually, I don't think lyrics help either, because as soon as you get a lyric, as soon as you get words, that might not be the words that the client wants to hear. There may be associations with those words. So actually, is that helpful? I think probably not. Neither are kind of highly rhythmic or kind of beats music where there's a kind of, kind of sampled beats going on underneath. I'm not sure that helps. It can do, but I don't find it very helpful. Virtuosic playing certainly might be a bit distracting. So somebody playing, a recording of a violin concerto or piano concerto, it might be fantastic playing. It might be really inspirational if you're into that kind of style of thing, but the sheer virtuosity of it might be really distracting, as might be really highly dissonant styles. So what do I mean by dissonant styles? I mean kind of things like this. Really hard to play, actually. That's not going to help, is it? the emotions that conjures for almost all of us is not going to be helpful. And neither is kind of obscure or niche genres of music. So by that, I mean perhaps something that's way outside of our cultural norm. Okay. So like I love, sitar and steel pan music. And I've got friends and colleagues who are brilliant practitioners in that. But I think if I put that on in a coaching session, okay, I'm more likely to be thinking about the association of that than something a little bit more neutral. There's a lot of meditation tracks and playlists that are out there. I'm not sure they're very helpful, actually. I don't know. For me, I don't find them very helpful. Certainly not elevator music. Do you know what I mean by elevator music? Yeah, just kind of gentle. No, that doesn't work either. And probably video doesn't work either, because as soon as you put something visual on, you're tempted to look at, oh, look, there's a mountain. I wonder which mountain that is. Oh, look, is that helpful? I'm not sure. Better to have nothing on the screen at that point, and just be focused on the sound. So what to do? Well, I'm a great proponent of less is more. This is a well-known axiom for artists across the world. It's a universal truth that it's very tempting to try and have too much. And in fact, I've learned this from experience, because there've been one or two tracks that I've used in a coaching session where I've asked the client, okay, was that helpful, the track? And they kind of went, oh, I was a bit busy. It's like, yeah, funny, I thought that too. So less is more. And I would always kind of listen to the track myself first several times to kind of make sure I'm really happy with it and familiar with it. So it becomes part of my, I'm familiar with it, but the client is not familiar with it. Okay. So the client won't know this track. And because, there are a gazillion number of tracks now on Spotify, that opens up massive options of using things that are not expected. They're not predictable. And that means that, that can take the listener to a different place, and slightly unexpected place. And I'll try and explore that a bit more with the piano in a moment. Those of you who are musicians, and I know there's probably loads of you on this call who have come to this because you're fascinated by the musical element of this session, and why not? I find an open musical structure with lots of space harmonically is really good. So a slight dissonance perhaps in kind of terms of chords. The openness of that chord just opens my mind. I don't know what it does for you, but it opens my mind completely. So that kind of structure, okay, there's a kind of, there's a technical kind of compositional side of that, which I find really helpful. And in terms of length of time, you don't want this to end up running for like 5-10 minutes in your session, okay, as because that can feel like an awfully long time. And also that's probably not what the client is wanting out of the session, just to listen to some nice music. They could do that at another point. However, what I've found so far in my experience, I'd be interested to know whether anybody else has got an experience in this, but I've found maybe kind of 90 to 120 seconds is about the right length of time. Any shorter than that and it feels too hurried, any more than that and it starts to feel like it drags on. So that's a pretty good guideline. I found that solo instruments can work: guitar, piano, cello, anything that feels a little bit vulnerable and hasn't got a whole band behind it, but it's intimate. It's got a feel of a live presence with some hints of minimalism. And again, we're getting a bit technical there. But minimalism, again, is the whole principle of less is more, and a relaxed, improvised feel. And I discovered through coaching that one of my values is improvisation. And improvisation is not making it up as you go along. Okay, improvisation, that's extemporization, which is different again. That's not one of my values. Improvisation is taking what exists and improving it. Okay, and actually most coaches are pretty good at this. Okay, and it's a really great coaching skill to have. But in terms of musical improvisation, we're talking about having a little bit of structure and then being able to kind of work on that and kind of build on that structure. So having a piece of music that feels a bit like that, it's kind of in the moment. You'll know it when you hear it. A comfortable level of dissonance, like we talked before, and I've developed a playlist on Spotify, which I'm happy to share, and we'll share at the end of these notes, where it kind of ticks the right boxes on this front, and I'd be really interested to know what you think of those particular tracks. And it's likely that you won't know them because I've explored quite depth and kind of done the hard miles listening to a lot of these. So that's what it will look like. As you see here, there's a kind of playlist I have in the background, and I will go and select one of these tracks that I know quite well, and I'll select one, and then I'll do I'll agree. We'll contract with the client. I'll share my sound, and we'll have a listen in silence together. And then we'll reflect and move on the next part of the session. And I'll use down here the volume control here just to kind of fade it in or out, because as you see, most of these tracks are 4, 5, 2.5 minutes. They're mostly too long for that kind of purpose. So a little bit of DJing is required. Right. So that's the principle. Okay. I'm going to try and have a minute or two now where I'm going to try and do this live. Okay. And if I was in a coaching session and there was a piano there, I would offer to do it live. Well, it just happens I do have a piano here. So again, get yourself comfortable, get yourself in a really good position. You might want to do some breathing, kind of, breathe in for 4, slowly hold it for 4, breathe out for 4. Hold it again for 4, and then go again. Close your eyes and relax. And think about everything that we've touched on over these last couple of days in this conference and this summit. And allow yourself a couple of minutes just to be. Well, thanks for your comments on there, and I hope that was helpful. And if there's anything I can help you with in the future, then do feel free to reach out to me. So, as I say, I'm going to put this on the warm up group, and the slides will be available as well. So you can connect with this playlist that I put together. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can connect with my dhrecords.com website if you're interested in the songwriting seminar or anything else that we can do to help. And there is the link to the TEDx talk by James Rhodes as well, which I mentioned earlier. I'm wondering if we've got time for a few questions. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask, it looks like we've got about 5 minutes. So if there's a question you'd like to ask, then I've got the chat open here. So feel free to ask away, unless Shelley, you've spotted one already.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'm just having a quick look for you now. I know there was a question about needing a music license when playing in a session.
Yeah. So I'll just stop sharing for a moment there. If you're so another way of doing this, if you haven't got a piano with you and you're not on Zoom, if you're doing a coaching session in person, there's no reason why you can't turn up with a device and a Bluetooth speaker or something and just share this moment very easily. You don't need a license to do that. You don't need a license to kind of play things on a Zoom call normally. In fact, during lockdown, I spent a lot of time every Monday evening. We had a listening session where I invited lots of friends to come along. We just listened to different tracks, and there, you can, there's not a problem with that. As soon as you put it onto Facebook Live or YouTube or anything like that, that's when you get, you're potentially in trouble there. But if it's original music or if it's copyright free music, there's nothing stopping you doing that. So, for instance, a lot of podcasts, I suspect Joe and Zoe's podcast uses a copyright-free piece of music. You know, that music that we all hear when the podcast starts and when the podcast ends, that will be either a specially written or a copyright-free, a royalty-free thing. So whenever when they put that out on their podcast, it doesn't get caught up in that whole licensing issue.
Yeah, it is. And actually, it was our children that chose out of the selection of copyright music. So the music was a lovely way, actually, that brought our families into the creation of the podcast.
Yeah.
Rebecca asked, do you use or can you recommend any mailer?
Any what, sorry?
Mahler. Is that right, Rebecca? Are you still on the call?
Sorry, can you spell it again?
Mahler.
Oh, Mahler, yes.
Mahler, sorry.
Yes, Gustav Mahler. Well, Gustav Mahler is a fantastic classical composer and has written some amazing bits, but some of his symphonies, for instance, last for 2 hours. So there are some moments from Mahler that you could certainly use from the classical realm, and a lot of that will be fairly unknown. But again, it's a case of like a little bit of research and kind of thinking about, well, what would the music support the moment that we're trying to create here? And so there's certainly some Mahler, and I might even put it on the playlist now. I'm going to look that up, but you would have to be quite selective as to which moment you chose. Yeah.
I think it's also really can be really useful with clients to when you're wanting to anchor in a particular shift in a coaching session, what music resonates with them, or there's lots of different ways for clients to bring music in. As you say, we all process our experiences in different ways. And so thinking about how as coach and coachee, we can draw on those things that are most meaningful for people is part of the creativity of coaching.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's music does things in your inner being, and it's unique, isn't it? We all have that unique kind of wiring and a unique experience of early life as well, which can be very formative in our kind of what we perceive are our musical preferences and experiences. And then as we mature, we get exposed to more and more um, different genres and different styles, and they have a connection with different periods of our life. I see Sherry has her hand raised. Well, happy Independence Day. What can we say, Sherry?
This is how I'm choosing to spend my holiday,
Beautiful.
is with you today.
Yeah.
I've worked with Paul. We were in our coaching class together, and he is an excellent coach in the sense of like, he'll take a read on how I'm doing when we start a session, and he'll see that I'm too high energy to get out what I need. And he'll like, can we pause for a second? How about we play this piece of music? And it totally transforms where my mindset is in entering the coaching session. And he'll use it on the back end as well to say, we had a intense session today. Let's leave this with a piece of music so that you are able to transition back into your regular life. It's really powerful.
Well, that's very kind of you to say that. I found it very powerful as a coach too, because as a coach, you're trying to process the session itself and everything that's happened, and actually having that shared experience. It's a two-way thing. You get to kind of feel a little bit more grounded and ready to kind of move on, rather than getting stuck in whatever moments of energy or wherever you've got to. So thanks for that, Sherry.
Thanks, Paul. I think we're good to wrap up now, if that's okay with you. Just like to say a massive thank you for this amazing last session of the summit. As so many people have said, what a wonderful way to end on such a lovely note. No pun intended there. And again, some fantastic comments in the chat for you, which of course we'll be passing on to you. And just a big thank you to everybody who has attended, not just this session, but for the whole summit. We have been absolutely blown away by the attendance for this. And I'm sure Zoe and Joe are probably feeling very proud right now for all their hard work of putting this together, as always. And just lastly, as we've been saying, our Facebook group is available still until Friday. Our speakers will be in there sharing their resources. If you want to get in contact, ask any questions, and please feel free to email us. Joe, would you like to make any final comment?
No, just thank you all so much. And Paul, thank you for that. It's prompted a lot of thoughts and probably emotions as well for people. If anybody has any questions, pop them in the group. Zoe and I are also running a Q&A on our ILM qualifications tomorrow, and also on our emotions coaching on Thursday. There are only about 2 spaces left on our September ILM program with Zoe and I. That's the semi-intensive. There's a few more in the evening session, but if you're thinking about doing that, the time is to act now if you don't want to miss out. But thanks again, Paul. I was really moved by your session, and I think it's important that we all kind of reconnect with things. Often people think, oh, I'm not really into music, or I'm not really into that, but it's about what our clients are into and what's meaningful for them as well. So thank you very much. Time to go, relax, play, however you want to transition. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Paul.